Welcome to Campus Supremacy. This was an HVH game mode put on by the Boiler League of Tag. Let's go over the rules quickly. There are two teams, red team and blue team. I'm on blue team because blue team is best. Each of these teams are vying for control points in the middle. You already own half of them, and there are two in the middle that both teams are trying to fight for, which is neutral zone. When you capture a middle point, you can then move on to the next point on your line, and attempt to capture that one. The other team, however, will be defending that point. Rules for capturing a point are there are rounds of 20 minutes apiece. When the round begins, both teams attempt to get to a moderator and tap that moderator to get them to start a timer for their team. Once they've tapped the moderator, their time begins. Whichever team has the most time on the clock after the 20-minute round is the victor and winner of that point. Respawns for each person are rolling on the fives. What that means is that when your watch turns any multiple of 5, you can respawn. However, respawns are territory based, which means that if you are in your own territory, you can respawn wherever as long as you're 20 feet away from an opposing player. However, if you are not in your own territory, in other words, in a neutral or enemy-controlled territory, you have to tag a teammate to respawn. This becomes an effective strategy to stop any team from advancing deep into your line by wiping them out. However, it also becomes an effective strategy to attack any team by hiding and then respawning all the players on your team on one person.
One stripe, 2S, canted flywheel cage.
You want to just take cover here?
Yeah.
Hey, Wassam, keep eyes on this corner.
We got 2 more on the way.
Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see a picture of my primary, Ripper. This is my current primary, however, it's not my current primary as for reasons that will be determined later on. What you might have noticed is I'm running it with a 35 drum at the beginning, and that's because it shoots 9 darts a second, which is a pretty high rate of fire. However, one thing I didn't factor in is that the 35 round drum has very inconsistent feeding, and so you can see, despite me pulling the trigger, there is still a lot of lag, and potentially sometimes it doesn't even shoot when I pull the trigger. And I say this, and as soon as I say it, I pop 6 shots off without a problem. So, such is life, right?
They might need that.
We're out in the open here.
My personal game type is a very suppressive game type. I tend to like pulling the trigger and just laying a cloud of darts out, basically deterring the enemy from shooting at me. This wasn't as effective in places like this area where you couldn't really suppress because there was no cover for you to suppress from. You were an open target and they had cover. So it wasn't exactly the most effective strategy. However, the ability to pop off a lot of rounds meant that I didn't need a whole ton of accuracy, which aided me a couple times here. As you'll see in a minute, it'll be a minute.
I'll do my best with that.
Right here. I got a nice equipment tag on that guy with the Centurion, which made me feel pretty happy.
Yes!
Now, one thing that was pretty interesting about this specific match is that it was very much a prototype, and there were a few things that the mods didn't know how to deal with and didn't anticipate that were kind of special circumstances and were kind of things that we didn't really plan for. And one of those was the ridiculous amount of people that weren't playing that were in the area. There were crowds and crowds of people walking down the engineering mall and this just active area, and that kind of made it difficult for the people who were not in the crowds, because there were a couple people who would walk with the crowds and shoot out from them, and we didn't want to shoot into the crowds for risk of being band pulled. Band pulled is a short term for basically getting thrown out of the game for misconduct.
Oh, that was close. Too close.
Here you can see my blaster does a pretty good job of laying down some suppressive fire. However, it's started to run away a little bit, which is a bit of an issue. Because your blaster isn't really firing when you want it to, which tends to be problematic. And here you'll see I take a couple pot shots off at the people there, and kind of regret it, because there were a lot of people around them, and I didn't really want to shoot into a crowd, and so I kind of pulled the trigger and then realized people were there, and so I stopped. And here you can see this guy's charging down farther so as to get out of civilian cover, and the other dude takes an opportunity to try and get us, and I unload a magazine on him, which worked out pretty well in my favor. However, my guess is that that was kind of the end, or the beginning of the end for my rapid strike. As you can see, it's running away with some pretty serious jamming issues. You can even hear the gearbox grinding in there a little bit, which was certainly a scary experience for me, considering I didn't want to permanently mess it up. But somehow I get that runaway under control, more or less, and decide that it's okay and I can just ignore it. In hindsight, I'm surprised I didn't see what came later.
They need a person to respawn.
Here you'll see I'm kind of meeting up with the rest of our group, and we're kind of falling back to a better position tactically. I move my drum and then get right around this corner so I can just take out this guy, and a couple shots through and he is gone. And at this point they have 5 minutes before they can respawn, and we have 5 minutes on the clock, which is about 10 minutes.
No, they need to get. They need a person here to respawn.
Say that we have the point. Now this is where things really start to go to shit. I walk up and pop off a few shots, and it's nothing. It doesn't really seem like anything's wrong. Then I move up to some cover and take another few shots, and here you can hear the gearbox grinding, which is never a good sign. So I'm trying to deal with this runaway, and I pop another couple shots off and nothing happens. And I'm just kind of back here trying to deal with whatever it is that's going on, and you can tell I'm getting pretty frustrated about it. I think that dart actually did come over and hit me, but nobody called that hit, and I actually didn't really see. I was a little preoccupied trying to figure out what was going on with my blaster, and so that actually was a shot that I should have called as a hit, but did not realize it. That being said, it doesn't really matter anymore, because at this point, I literally have decided to shelf the blaster. It is running away like mad, and I am currently taking the battery out. So, quick PSA. Always have a screwdriver on you, especially if you're running a LiPo, so that you can take your LiPo out. It is important that you can easily remove the battery from your blaster in case of a safety reason. This wasn't a particularly dangerous reason, as there was no extra torque or load on the battery. However, in certain cases, you may need to remove your battery immediately, or else it might catch fire or melt or some other thing, and so it is always imperative that you carry something to do quick maintenance on your blaster in the field. Another PSA, when you modify flywheel blasters, always upgrade your switches. I am 80 to 90% sure that the reason this blaster malfunctioned in such a horrible way is because of the switches that I used. I used the stock switches for the pusher return and an upgraded switch for the rev. The rev, actually, I tried to use a stock switch before, and it was doing the same thing the pusher return is doing now. And so I'm 80% sure that's the problem, and I'm taking steps to fix it currently, but that is kind of what happened to my blaster here. And so at this point, this blaster is completely unusable for the rest of the day. It's no fun for anybody, especially not me. The other team was pretty happy about it, but realistically, they actually weren't. And so it was kind of just an overall bummer for everyone here. However, you can see I kind of grab my blaster and make the walk of shame back to the command post, where I will then take my longboard and run back to my dorm, where I can grab myself a new blaster and stow this one safely. Now, here you'll notice I've got my Elite Alpha Trooper. Its name is Skellington, and this is just a regular Elite Alpha Trooper painted to match the Nitron scope, because I think the Nitron scope looks sick. Here you'll see we're coming up on a couple people, and I start to kind of assess the situation and take in what's going on, and see someone coming up to really try and capture the point, and I start going after him. The nice thing about this Alpha Trooper is it's really easy to pop off shots. I've worked with it for a long time, so it's very comfortable in my hands, and you can see I'm even making this guy have to dance a little bit to avoid some shots. So it's going pretty well for me. However, you also might be able to tell that I'm really throwing ammo downrange, like a lot of ammo. And right there I actually hit him. However, in hindsight, I raised my hand and said hit when I hit him, which is kind of confusing because that's mostly what I do when I get hit. So in future, I'm gonna try not to do that as much. And then here you'll see I'm lobbing off some shots that I know I can't hit on this guy with the turbo advance, and that comes back to bite me. Although this one is successful, it comes back to bite me when I pop some shots off at these next teammates that are coming on, and then have to reload, giving them some time to close the distance. Then I'm coming around. We are currently capturing the point, and we're using the mod as cover, and you can see I just throw foam downrange to get that guy, and it was not good, because you'll see as I come up on this next guy, I take a shot, I take another one, and it's empty. And he sees this and he comes full on at me, and here I'm trying to draw my secondary, when realistically I should have just thrown another mag in because it would have been faster. However, I get here and this guy finally leaves me alone after missing a shot just barely, and I get some time to draw my secondary. I shoot 2 rival rounds, reload it, and shoot 1. And with my Chronos, I'm able to just harass him enough to get him to kind of give up and go back to the group, considering they're currently winning. At this point, I reload my Alpha Trooper so that it's no longer empty, and then prepare to join the battle again. So you can see I already popped off a shot there that was way farther than I could have hit. So you kind of know I'm used to a much stronger, more suppressive weapon. Here I'm making sure everyone in my team is spawned in before we actually go in and try and get these people. And now we're going to try and attack on that other team so that we can get back to holding this point. Here I go in for a little bit closer range so I can actually try and get some reasonable shots off on these people. But you'll see I kind of get surrounded a little bit, or not surrounded, but kind of set upon by multiple angles, and it just becomes too much, and I get taken down. And I go to grab my secondary so that I can pack my stuff up. And so, my teammates all went to
Hey
respawn,
guys, don't
and
all
I
die,
stayed
I need
here
to
and
respawn.
reloaded mags, and even threw a 25-round drum into my Alpha Trooper. They were chill with this, and I was able to respawn on them and easily get back in the game real quick. And get back to throwing all of the ammo in my mag downrange. You can see the inconsistent rate of fire of the 25-round drum is kind of shafting me a little bit, but it's working out so far. The next thing we do, in hindsight, I find it kind of sketchy and probably not the best decision at the time, but hindsight is always clearer. We kind of take this inlet sort of area, which kind of leaves us very cornered in a way, and it allows one guy with a strife to easily come in from a side we weren't defending and take us all out. So, we lost that specific objective, but won the engineering fountain again, and as such, we got to move on to the same objective. However, the moderator who was moderating this objective kind of decided that where he was standing was a little unfair for the attacking team, because there was no way to defend yourself from an onslaught, and because people could spawn in at that specific spot, it kind of became too difficult to defend and hold that position. So they moved the command point over to here, a slightly more defensible area. You can see I'm already trying to get dug in and establish a hold here, even though the round hasn't technically started yet. And because of this, I kind of overextend myself and quickly get into a firefight with these two guys that could have gone better. I see that I overextend myself and I've decided to retreat tactically, but I get shot in the back while I'm going. So, I'm out. Luckily, we get a respawn timer very, very quickly, and I'm able to respawn right back in. However, we've already lost our footing on that area that I had tried to gain, and so it was all pretty much for nothing, and I get hit again. Somehow my team came out on top of that firefight, and we were able to gain control of the blue timer for a little bit. Here, I spawn back in, and I'm ready to join the fight again, as do all of the other red team members. Here, I'm watching and gaining a little bit of distance, and watching for a flank. I try to go after them with some slam fire, and my gun jams, so this didn't really go too well for me in terms of that. With a decent amount of time on the clock and another point that we were able to defend, we all went over to the other point and kind of captured that one for sure, and then went back to going after the point that we had just been at. Here you see my Alpha Trooper jams yet again, but I'm also attempting to kind of rally people towards that point, because we have 5 minutes on there, and they are about to have just around 5 minutes on that clock, and I'm trying to get us through the enemy team, all of the enemy team, in full force, and to that moderator to switch the clock before they get to 10 minutes, which would basically tell us that we would lose that specific point. And so I'm kind of trying to like gauge everything and see how we can get through this, and we kind of get trapped in this corridor-like area where they can shoot over the fences and from behind trees that we don't really have access to, which kind of leads to this sort of kill channel, which stalls us a little bit. And one of the other team members kind of sees that and starts to walk towards there. And I just give him a quick warning that someone else is coming up from the other side of the Armstrong building, and he takes a little bit of caution there. Once he has some backup, they both go and take that guy out. And we, in the kill channel, try and cover the people who are trying to shoot at them from behind. As you can see here, I'm laying down a bit of suppressing fire. Now I take a quick check at what their status is. I can't remember exactly, but I do believe one of them died and one of them lived. And then I lay down a little more fire before I go and walk back around to where he was to try and sort of become a more supportive role for my teammates in the kill channel, as I'm going to be calling it now. And so what I do is I kind of go around and sort of lay down some fire from behind these lowered grounds, and then come out to the very edge of this, where my teammates are then distracting them, and I get some nice hits on people who were distracted by my teammates, taking them out right quickly. At this time, I've finally expended that 25-round drum, and I'm switching to something a bit more practical, and I'm thinking about who's got that point. Check to make sure this guy's okay. He kind of fell on his head, and then I'm checking to be sure who's in and who's out, and then I make a beeline for that mod because I know we are down to the wire. It turns out when I got to the mod, they had just about 8 minutes on our clock and we had 5 minutes, with about 7 minutes left in the round, and so we were able to capture that point and really get on it. So it was mostly just reloading until the spawn timer kicked back in. And so now that the red team is going off to spawn again, I kind of get back behind these pillars and get ready for an assault. However, I'm looking and making sure they don't stick their heads out too far, and see this guy kind of creep up and start yelling to his teammates to kind of organize a charge and take a nice shot right square in the chest. He's not too pleased about this at all. And you can see my Alpha Trooper actually jams here, and what he says is lost to me as I'm a little busy fixing my gun. By the time I've got the dart out and the jam cleared, I've got a couple people kind of running a bit of support for me, and I'm ready to support them as they go up and take out that next group of people. However, I notice a bit of a charge coming on and turn to ward that off a bit and successfully take out the guy who's coming after us. At this point, the two people that I was going after before that were around that corner had kind of run off behind this building over here. And so we stationed one person at either side to kind of make sure that if they came around or if they juked us and doubled back, we would see them. And I also take this quick opportunity to switch mags and top off, because that's always important in an HVH game where you are only as effective as the amount of darts you have in your mag. There we go. That was what I meant to say. And so here you can see this person takes off and I hear that there's contact. So I take a second, shout back and let people know we've got contact over here. And then I go run up to help support that person. But it turns out there's not much need for supporting. They're kind of hiding behind a car, and so we just let it go because we've already got more minutes than they do. And at this point, the game kind of ends for me. I was playing every other round as a moderator and every other round as a player.
We have a guaranteed cap?
Yep, guaranteed cap.
Alright. Switch out.
And here you can see I switch bands with this one player that was helping me co-mod. And the reason for this was because I wanted to play, but they also needed moderators. And me, being a junior moderator, was kind of stuck in the crossfire of that.
This was a very contended point.